After years of living under our HOA's iron fist, they finally crossed the line by raising my fees over having too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying up the neighborhood properties for years, and now it was time to show Karen, our power-hungry HOA president, who really owned this community. But would she accept defeat? Gracefully when I revealed my secret. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I never wanted trouble with our HOA. Really, I didn't. But when I found that bright orange notice taped to my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this was war. My hands were shaking as I read it. Immediate HOA fee increase, $500 monthly. Violation, excessive vehicles on property, 3 cars. That's what this was about. My work truck that I need for my construction business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shifts, and the used Honda we'd bought for our daughter's 16th birthday last month. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. I watched through my kitchen window as Karen Mitchell, our HOA president, did her morning inspection walk with her little pink clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures. Again. This was the 3rd time this week. "Honey, she's out there again," my wife Sarah called from the living room. "Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage?" "No," I said firmly, pouring my coffee. "We're not hiding our daughter's car like we're doing something wrong. The garage is full of Sarah's medical supplies and my work equipment. Exactly like we explained at the last HOA meeting. That meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about how Karen had smirked when I tried to explain our situation. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you." What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been quietly buying up properties in our development for the past 5 years through my real estate investment company. Every time a house went up for sale, I made sure to use different LLC names for the purchases. It started as a smart investment strategy, but now it had become something more. I walked outside to get the mail, purposely taking my time. Karen pretended to inspect Mrs. Johnson's rose bushes, while watching me from the corner of her eye. Poor Mrs. Johnson had been fined last month for having roses that were too vibrant and disrupting neighborhood color harmony. My phone buzzed, a text from my lawyer. "Property closing complete. You now own 67% of the development." I smiled, tucking the phone away as Karen power walked toward me, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "I trust you received our notice about the vehicle violation?" "I did, Karen, and I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase." I kept my voice calm and professional. She waved her hand dismissively. "The board has full authority to implement fees as needed. Perhaps if you attended more meetings, you'd understand how these things work." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Little did she know, I'd attended every single meeting for the past 5 years through proxy representatives who owned the other houses. I'd sat back and documented every one of Karen's selective enforcements, every questionable fee, every abuse of power. As she turned to leave, her designer heels clicking on the sidewalk, she called over her shoulder, "Oh, and the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight, 7 p.m. sharp. We'll be discussing additional measures about problem properties." I watched her walk away, then pulled out my phone again to text my lawyer. "Time to prepare those documents we discussed. Karen's making her move tonight." My daughter's car pulled into the driveway just then, and I saw Karen stop to take more photos. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Tonight would change everything in this neighborhood. But first, I had some calls to make. I went inside and spread out the property maps on my desk, each lot carefully highlighted and coded. 5 years of careful planning, of building evidence, of watching Karen's reign of HOA terror grow worse. Tonight, she would learn that her biggest mistake wasn't just targeting my family. It was underestimating exactly who she was dealing with. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson from across the street, crying about another violation notice. As I listened to her story, I glanced at the framed photo on my wall, my father standing proud in front of his first house, before an HOA's harassment had forced him to sell at a loss 20 years ago. Dad had taught me to play the long game, to fight smart instead of angry. I looked at my watch, 6 hours until the meeting. Karen wanted to play hardball over a few cars in a driveway. She had no idea what was coming. I walked into the community center's meeting room and immediately felt the tension. Every seat was filled, with neighbors I'd known for years sitting shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves. Karen had really outdone herself this time. She'd even hired a professional photographer to take pictures of my driveway from different angles, making 3 normal-sized cars look like some kind of illegal parking lot. "Let's begin," Karen announced, tapping her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She'd called this emergency meeting on a Tuesday evening, knowing full well that most working families would struggle to attend. But I'd made sure to be there, sitting quietly in the back row, watching her put on her usual show. As you can see from these professional photographs, she began, clicking through her PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Thompson's property has become a used car lot. A few gasps came from her loyal followers in the front row, the same ones whose Christmas decorations stayed up until March without any fines. I glanced around the room, noting how Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd been fined last month for having her grandson's car in her driveway while he helped repair her roof. Mr. Chen, the high school science teacher, was furiously taking notes. He'd received a violation notice for parking his car slightly over his own driveway line during the last snowstorm. Karen clicked to the next slide, showing a zoomed-in photo of my daughter's car. This vehicle here has been parked in the same spot for over 48 hours. She failed to mention it was because my daughter was home from college for the weekend. The meeting dragged on as Karen presented her evidence. Charts showing supposed property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, probably her friends, and even weather reports suggesting my cars were creating excess snowdrifts on the street. Furthermore, she continued, pulling out a thick binder, I've documented every instance of vehicles entering and leaving Mr. Thompson's property over the past 3 months. My eyebrows shot up. She'd been tracking my family's movements. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's when Sarah Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, stood up. Karen, isn't this a bit excessive? They're just regular cars in a regular driveway. Karen's face reddened as she snapped, You're out of order! You haven't been recognized by the chair. I watched as Karen's husband, Bob, started handing out copies of a new proposed bylaw, one that would limit each household to 2 vehicles and require garage parking only. The absurdity of it all almost made me laugh. Almost. We'll now vote on the new vehicle restrictions and fee increase, Karen declared, not even bothering to allow discussion. All in favor? That was my cue. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. Point of order, Madam President. Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked at me over her reading glasses. You're not recognized, Mr. Thompson. Actually, I said, pulling out my own folder. According to HOA Bylaw Section 7.3, any property owner may raise a point of order regarding voting procedures. The room fell silent. I could see Karen's perfectly manicured nails gripping the podium tighter. Before we vote, I believe it's important to review the HOA's current property ownership structure. I started walking toward the front of the room, my shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. You see, over the past 5 years, Sunrise Properties has been acquiring homes in this development. Karen's face started to lose its color as I pulled out a large property map. And as CEO of Sunrise Properties, I thought it might interest everyone to know exactly who owns the majority of this HOA. I paused, making eye contact with each board member. But perhaps we should discuss that after we review these questionable surveillance activities you've been conducting. The room erupted in murmurs. Through my peripheral vision, I could see phones coming out, neighbors recording every moment. Karen's hand trembled as she reached for her water bottle, knocking over her precious gavel in the process. And that's when Bob rushed to the podium, whispering something in Karen's ear. Her eyes widened as she finally realized who she'd been messing with all these years. The meeting room fell silent as I stood up. My heart was pounding, but my voice remained steady. Karen's smug smile started to fade as I pulled out my leather briefcase. Before we vote on these new fees, I said, I have something important to share with everyone. I clicked open my briefcase and removed a thick stack of property deeds, laying them one by one on the table. Each paper represented another piece of my secret plan coming together. The room buzzed with whispers as I arranged them in neat rows. For the past 5 years, I continued, I've watched this HOA board ignore serious maintenance issues while harassing good neighbors over tiny things. I've seen Karen here write up Mrs. Johnson, who's 82 years old, for having a flower pot that was 1 inch too tall. Meanwhile, her friend Susan's bright purple fence somehow never got a single warning. Karen's face turned red. That's not true! I enforce all rules fairly. She grabbed her water bottle, but her hand was shaking so much she spilled some on her designer blouse. I pulled up photos on the meeting room's big screen. Here's Karen measuring my grass at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. The security camera footage was crystal clear. Several people gasped. And here she is ignoring the Thompson's violations completely, right after they hired her son's landscaping company. More whispers filled the room. I could see people starting to nod, remembering their own run-ins with Karen's selective enforcement. But the most interesting thing I discovered, I said, picking up the stack of deeds, is that through my company, Sunrise Properties, I now own 67% of the homes in this development. I paused as the meaning sank in. That makes me the majority owner of the HOA itself. Karen jumped up, knocking over her chair. You can't do that! It's not allowed! Her voice had gone squeaky with panic. I smiled calmly. Actually, I can. I've had 3 different law firms review everything. It's completely legal. I pulled out another folder. I also have signed complaints from 32 residents about harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious fees. The room erupted. Mrs. Johnson stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. Last winter, they fined me $200 for not shoveling my walkway fast enough. I was in the hospital with pneumonia. Others joined in, sharing their stories. Karen tried to restore order, banging her gavel. But nobody was listening to her anymore. I moved to dissolve the current board, I announced. We'll hold new elections, with term limits and clear rules about conflict of interest. No more 3 a.m. grass measuring. No more selective enforcement. Bob Chen from 2 doors down raised his hand. I second that motion. Soon hands were going up all around the room. Karen grabbed her designer purse and started toward the door. This meeting is adjourned, she yelled. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Actually, I said, still calm, according to HOA bylaws, section 7.3, you need a majority vote to adjourn. And I don't think you have that anymore. I gestured at the deeds spread across the table. We're just getting started. She froze with her hand on the doorknob, realizing her power was slipping away. 20 years of ruling the neighborhood with an iron fist were coming to an end. Now, I said, opening another folder, let's talk about those mysterious pool renovation fees from last summer. The ones where $50,000 disappeared but the pool never got fixed. I have some interesting bank records to share. Karen slumped against the wall, her face pale. She hadn't noticed yet, but a local news van had just pulled into the parking lot. I'd invited them to cover our community reorganization meeting. The next few hours would change our neighborhood forever. But first, we had years of Karen's secrets to uncover. And I had every single receipt. My careful planning was finally paying off. And the best part was still to come. I walked into my lawyer's office on Monday morning to find 20 angry voicemails from Karen. She'd discovered my company's property records over the weekend and was threatening to sue me for secretly trying to take over the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She'd finally shown her true colors. But Karen wasn't just angry. She was scared. That evening, she went door to door, spreading rumors that I was planning to turn our peaceful suburb into a parking lot for my car collection. Some neighbors actually believed her, especially after she showed them fake documents suggesting I had connections to a shady development company. I knew I had to act fast. My security cameras caught Karen sneaking onto my property at midnight, taking close-up photos of my car's license plates. The next day, she filed a lawsuit claiming I'd broken HOA rules by buying properties through my company. She even tried to get an emergency court order to freeze my voting rights in the HOA. That's when my months of careful planning paid off. My lawyer revealed our secret weapon, a detailed record of every HOA meeting for the past 5 years. We had videos showing Karen giving her friends passes on their violations, while harshly fining others. We had copies of checks showing she'd used HOA funds to renovate her own backyard. Best of all, we had emails where she bragged about using her power to keep undesirable elements out of the neighborhood. The judge's eyes got wider with each piece of evidence. Karen's face turned red when we showed time-stamped footage of her measuring my grass with a ruler at 3 a.m., taking photos of my teenage daughter's car, and placing threatening notes on my neighbors' doors. Her lawyer started sweating when we presented proof that she'd changed HOA records to hide her friends' unpaid dues. But the real shock came when 3 former board members stepped forward. They testified about how Karen had bullied them into approving unfair rules, admitted to targeting specific homeowners she didn't like, and even bragged about using HOA fines to fund her yearly trips to Hawaii. The courtroom got really quiet when we showed Karen's social media posts, mocking elderly residents who couldn't pay their HOA fees. There she was, posting poolside photos from Maui with the caption, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this vacation. Keep those violations coming." Karen tried to defend herself, claiming she was just doing her job. But then, we played the recording from last month's HOA meeting, where she'd screamed at Mrs. Johnson, our 75-year-old neighbor, for having a bird feeder that was 2 inches too low. That's when Karen finally lost it. She jumped up from her seat, pointing her finger at me. "He's trying to destroy our perfect neighborhood," she shouted. "Do you know what kind of people will move in if we don't have strict rules? He probably wants to turn this into one of those communities where people can park wherever they want." The judge had heard enough. He not only dismissed Karen's lawsuit, but ordered a full audit of the HOA's finances. As we left the courthouse, my phone started buzzing with texts from neighbors. They'd all received a mass email from Karen announcing her immediate resignation from the board, claiming she was being forced out by big money interests. I watched her storm to her car, already typing furiously on her phone. I knew this wasn't over. Karen still had loyal followers in the neighborhood, and she wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. But for now, I had what I needed, proof that our HOA president had been abusing her power for years, and the legal authority to make real changes. The morning of the final court hearing started with a surprise. Karen had sent an army of vans to my house. She thought public pressure would make me back down, but she'd just given me the perfect stage. I straightened my tie, grabbed my documents, and walked right up to the reporters with a smile. "Good morning, everyone. I'm James Thompson, and I'd love to show you something interesting about our HOA's financial records." I pulled out the color-coded spreadsheets my accountant had prepared, showing years of suspicious fees that always seemed to end up in projects that benefited Karen's closest friends. The reporter's eyes lit up as I explained how Karen had charged single parents higher violation fees than her golf buddies. One reporter gasped when I showed security footage of Karen measuring my grass at 3 a.m., while her own yard violated every rule in the book. Inside the courthouse, Karen sat with her expensive lawyer, wearing her signature fake pearl necklace and a smug smile. That smile vanished when our lawyer started presenting evidence. We showed photos of Karen's own house breaking rules. Her bright purple mailbox, her overgrown garden, and her son's 4 cars parked on the street. The judge leaned forward when we revealed Karen's secret Facebook group where she bragged about targeting certain families. "Let's see how long the Thompsons last with these new fees," she'd written. "Maybe they'll finally move and sell to someone more suitable." Karen jumped up to object, but stopped cold when we played the recording from last week's pool party. Her voice rang clear through the courtroom. "Of course I make up violations. How else can we keep control of who lives here?" The judge's gavel came down hard. Not only was Karen removed from the HOA board, but she had to pay back every unfair fee she'd collected. The look on her face when she heard the total, $147,892, was better than any revenge I could have planned. I used my majority ownership to create a new HOA board with a difference. We elected 5 residents from different parts of the neighborhood, including Mrs. Rodriguez, who Karen had tried to fine for cooking ethnic food, and Mr. Chen, whose beautiful garden Karen called too exotic. The changes came fast. Kids could now play basketball in their driveways. Gardens could grow vegetables, not just flowers. And yes, families could park more than 2 cars as long as they fit in their own space. 3 weeks later, I watched through my window as Karen's moving truck pulled up. She'd sent a final letter to everyone, claiming she was moving to a better neighborhood with higher standards. Nobody missed how her new HOA's parking ticket was stuck to her windshield as she drove away. My daughter parked her car in our driveway that evening, right next to my work truck and my wife's SUV. I put up a small sign we'd all voted on. "Welcome to Thompson. Hills, where good neighbors make good neighborhoods." The next morning, I got an unexpected call. A TV producer had seen the news coverage and wanted to make a documentary about how we'd transformed our HOA. As I looked out at kids playing freely in their yards and neighbors chatting over garden fences, I smiled thinking about Karen, watching it from her new house with its 1-car garage rule. The best part? Our property values went up 15% in the first month after Karen left. Turns out people really do prefer living in a neighborhood where they're treated with respect instead of ruled by fear. Some of Karen's old friends stopped by to apologize, admitting they'd just been scared of becoming her next target. We still have an HOA, but now it protects the neighborhood instead of policing it. Every month, we use the fees for things that actually matter: improving the playground, fixing the pool, helping elderly residents maintain their homes. We even started a community garden in the spot where Karen used to take her yard violation photos. As I file away the last of the court documents, my phone buzzes with a text. It's from Karen's new neighborhood watch group. They're asking for advice about dealing with their own power-hungry HOA president. I lean back in my chair, thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing others how to stand up for themselves.